Welcome to Whispering Pages. You made it. You're here, and that already says something, because most people end the day with a screen and a scroll. You chose something different. Before we get into tonight's book, let's just arrive. You've been moving all day, thinking, deciding, reacting. And now, for the first time in hours, nobody needs anything from you. There's nowhere to be, nothing to fix. Just this moment, and a quiet voice in the dark. Notice the stillness around you. Maybe it's not perfectly quiet. Maybe there are sounds in the house, a fan, the hum of a city outside. That's okay. Let it all be background. It doesn't need your attention right now. If there's any tension you're holding in your body, maybe across your chest, or in your hands, or behind your eyes, just notice it. You don't need to force it away. Just let your awareness rest there gently, and often that's enough for it to soften on its own. There's something worth knowing about this window of time. Neuroscience tells us that the brain in its pre-sleep state is unusually receptive. The usual noise quiets down, and new information gets a clearer path to memory. What you hear in the last 30 minutes before sleep doesn't compete with everything else. It settles deeply. So tonight's book isn't just something to pass the time before you drift off. It's something that might actually change the way you move through tomorrow. Tonight we're exploring Atomic Habits, written by James Clear and published in 2018. It's one of the most widely read books on human behavior of the past decade, and if you've heard of it before, I'd encourage you to listen anyway. The ideas in this book are the kind that look different the second time around. They have a way of becoming more true the more you understand them. So let's begin. Settle in. And let's whisper through this one together. On the last day of his sophomore year of high school, James Clear was hit in the face with a baseball bat. Not a controlled tap, a full swing from a teammate whose hand slipped at the worst possible moment. The bat smashed directly between his eyes, crushing his nose, fracturing his skull in multiple places, and sending his brain slamming into the inside of his skull. By the time the ambulance arrived, James had lost consciousness. He was airlifted to a hospital in Cincinnati, where doctors placed him in a medically induced coma. His parents, who had already spent years at this same hospital with a daughter being treated for leukemia, found themselves back in those waiting rooms again. He survived. But the recovery was long and disorienting. Double vision for weeks. Seizures. 8 months before he could drive again. He came back to baseball the following season and was cut from the varsity team, left sobbing in his car. He barely played in high school at all. And then something shifted. When James arrived at Denison University, he made a decision. He couldn't control how much talent he had, but he could control his habits. He started going to bed early when his roommates stayed up gaming. He kept his room clean in the chaos of the dorms. He built a weightlifting habit, then a study habit, then a sleep habit. None of these felt dramatic, but they compounded. By his senior year, James Clear had been named the top male athlete at Denison University and earned a spot on the ESPN Academic All-American team. Not through one defining moment, through the quiet, daily repetition of small things done well. That experience is what this book is built on. Not the idea that big results require big action, but the opposite, that tiny habits, practiced consistently, compound into extraordinary outcomes over time. The central metaphor of the book is this: if you can get just 1% better every day, you'll end up roughly 37 times better by the end of a year. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day, you'll decline almost to zero. 1% seems invisible. Over time, it's everything. Claire calls this the compounding of habits. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. The same math that makes money multiply in a savings account applies to who you're becoming. You don't see the gains in the moment. You see them years later, when you look back and realize that the person you are today was assembled, quietly and invisibly, out of the things you kept doing. But there's a problem. We're not wired to feel the impact of small improvements as they happen. So we get frustrated. We try, we don't see results, and we stop. Clay has a name for this gap, the plateau of latent potential. He describes it like an ice cube sitting on a table in a cold room. The temperature climbs from 25 degrees to 31. Nothing visible happens. But at 32 degrees, the ice melts. That 1 degree shift triggers everything. All the warming before it wasn't wasted, it was being stored. This is what happens with habits. The work you're doing today isn't failing to produce results. It's accumulating below the surface, toward a threshold most people quit just before reaching. The other pillar of part 1 is a distinction that cuts very deep. The difference between focusing on goals and focusing on systems. Claire points out something uncomfortable. Every person who enters a race has the same goal of finishing. The goal doesn't explain who crosses the line. The system behind it does. Goals are fine for setting a direction, but they create a conditional relationship with happiness. I'll be satisfied when I achieve this. And they solve a problem only momentarily. You clean your room, but if the habits that made it messy haven't changed, it'll be messy again within weeks. Systems are different. Systems are the daily processes that produce results over time. The basketball player who focuses on daily practice rather than on winning a championship will likely win the championship. The writer who focuses on writing every morning will likely write the best-selling book. The score, as Coach Bill Walsh once said, takes care of itself. This is the foundation of the whole book. Forget about goals. Fall in love with the system. And then build a system that actually works. So if goals aren't enough, and small daily habits are the real engine of change, why do those habits feel so hard to sustain? Claire's answer is one of the most quietly radical ideas in the book, and it reshapes everything that follows. Most people approach habit change from the outside in. They decide what they want, lose 20 pounds, read more, drink less, and then try to build the behavior that gets them there. But Claire argues this approach is working against itself. Because eventually, the motivation runs out. The craving for the old behavior returns. And without something deeper anchoring the new one, it drifts away. The alternative is to start from the inside. Not with what you want, but with who you want to become. Claire maps out 3 layers of behavior change, like the layers of an onion. The outermost layer is outcomes, the results you want. The middle layer is processes, the habits and systems you follow. And the innermost layer is identity, the beliefs you hold about yourself. Most habit advice works on the outer 2 layers. But the most durable change, Claire says, happens when you work inward. When you change not just what you do, but what you believe about who you are. He makes this vivid with a simple example. Imagine 2 people trying to quit smoking. Someone offers them a cigarette. The first person says, "No thanks. I'm trying to quit." The second says, "No thanks. I'm not a smoker." That's not a small difference. The first person still identifies as a smoker who is struggling. The second has already changed who they are. Every action you take is a vote for a particular identity. When you go to the gym, you cast a vote for being someone who takes care of their body. When you sit down to write a page, you vote for being a writer. When you choose water over soda, you vote for being someone who values their health. No single vote wins the election. But as the votes accumulate, the evidence builds. And eventually, you genuinely begin to believe it. The goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to write a book. The goal is to become a writer. The habit follows naturally from the identity, not the other way around. This shifts the entire question you ask yourself. Instead of how do I motivate myself to do this, you ask what would a person like me do in this situation? And once you've cast enough votes, the answer becomes obvious. From here, Clear moves into the mechanics of habits, specifically how they are built and broken. He describes a four-step loop that underlies every habitual behavior: cue, craving, response, reward. It runs automatically, often invisibly, hundreds of times a day. The cue is the trigger, something in your environment that signals the brain a reward might be nearby. The craving is the desire that arises, not for the behavior itself, but for the change in state it delivers. The response is the action you take. And the reward is what you get, which closes the loop and teaches the brain whether to repeat this the next time the cue appears. You don't choose coffee in the morning because you love the ritual of brewing it. You choose it because some part of your brain has learned that coffee means alertness, and alertness feels good, and the smell of the kettle is enough to trigger the whole chain. By the time you're conscious of what you're doing, the habit is already underway. Clear takes this four-step loop and builds his entire practical framework around it: the 4 laws of behavior change. To build a good habit, make the cue obvious, make the craving attractive, make the response easy, make the reward satisfying. To break a bad one, make the cue invisible, make the craving unattractive, make the response difficult, make the reward unsatisfying. Everything in the rest of the book flows from these 4 principles. Let's walk through each one. The first law, make it obvious, is about awareness. Most of our habits run beneath conscious attention. They're triggered automatically by cues we don't even register. Clear suggests something almost uncomfortably simple. Write down your current habits, label each one as positive, negative, or neutral, and then actually look at your days. This is the habit scorecard. Not to judge yourself, just to see what's actually happening, because you can't change what you can't see. From there, he introduces 2 strategies for building new habits. The first is the implementation intention. Instead of vague aspirations like "I'll exercise more," you commit to specifics. I will exercise at 7 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at the gym on 5th Street. Studies show this simple shift, adding a time and a place, more than doubles follow-through rates. The vagueness of intention isn't a moral failure. It's a design failure. Specificity fixes it. The second strategy is habit stacking, tying a new behavior to an existing one. After I pour my morning coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute. After I sit down to dinner, I will say one thing I'm grateful for. After I take off my shoes when I get home, I will immediately change into workout clothes. You're not creating a new habit from scratch. You're inserting it into the momentum of something you already do, which makes it far more likely to stick. The first law also extends beyond scheduling. One of the book's most quietly powerful ideas is that your environment shapes your behavior more than your willpower does. Clear makes this concrete with a simple study. A hospital cafeteria rearranged its drink stations, placing bottled water next to every food station while keeping sodas in their usual spots. Nobody said a word to anyone. Soda sales dropped. Water sales rose. Nobody's willpower changed. The environment did. We like to believe we make choices through deliberate reasoning, but often we just respond to whatever is most visible and accessible. The cookie gets eaten not because we're weak, but because it's on the counter. The phone gets checked not because we planned to, but because it lit up in arm's reach. Design your environment so the right choice is also the easy one. Put the guitar in the center of the room, not the closet. Put the vitamins next to the coffee maker. Make the cues of good habits impossible to miss. And for bad habits, the inverse applies. Remove the cue and the habit often disappears. Claire points to a study of heroin-addicted veterans returning from Vietnam. In the US, around 90% of heroin users relapse after rehab. But among soldiers who went from a war zone saturated with triggers back to home environments free of those cues, the relapse rate was closer to 10. The drug didn't change. The cues did. The second law is make it attractive. Habits are dopamine-driven, and dopamine rises not when we receive a reward, but when we anticipate one. This is why the notification sound is more compelling than what's in the notification. The anticipation is the engine. To leverage this, Clear introduces temptation bundling. Pair something you need to do with something you want to do. Only allow yourself to listen to your favorite podcast while exercising. Only watch your favorite show while folding laundry. The thing you want becomes the reward that makes the thing you need feel irresistible. He also points to the deep pull of social norms. We unconsciously imitate the habits of the people closest to us. If your close friends exercise, you're more likely to exercise. If you join a community where the behavior you want is considered normal, where people read constantly, or eat well, or meditate every morning, you'll find that identity shift comes naturally. You're no longer fighting your environment. You're swimming with the current. The third law is make it easy. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive section of the book, because it runs against the intuition that hard work and discipline are the foundations of good habits. Claire doesn't deny the value of effort, but he points out that the human brain is wired for least effort. It will always gravitate toward the path of lowest friction. This isn't laziness. It's the brain conserving energy for what matters. So instead of fighting this tendency, design with it. The classic example is the 2-minute rule. When starting a new habit, the first step should take less than 2 minutes. You don't start with run 5 miles. You start with put on your running shoes. You don't start with write a chapter. You start with open the document. You don't start with read for an hour. You start with read 1 page. This sounds almost embarrassingly modest, but the genius is in what it does. It removes the friction of starting. And starting is almost always the hardest part. Once your shoes are on, you usually go for the run. Once the document is open, you usually write more than 1 sentence. The 2-minute rule is a gateway, not a ceiling. Claire pairs this with environment priming, setting up your space in advance so the next action is easy. Before bed, set out tomorrow's gym clothes. Chop vegetables on Sundays so healthy eating during the week requires no effort. Put the remote in a drawer and the book on the coffee table. Stack the deck in favor of the behavior you want. He also discusses automation, the ultimate form of making it easy. Some decisions, once made, never need to be made again. Enrolling in automatic savings. Setting up a website blocker during work hours. Buying a good mattress. These one-time choices compound quietly in your favor forever. The fourth law is make it satisfying. and it addresses perhaps the cruelest quirk of how good habits work. For many of the behaviors that are best for us, the cost comes immediately and the reward comes later. You feel the discomfort of the workout now. The health benefits arrive months from now. You feel the sacrifice of skipping dessert now. The slimmer reflection arrives weeks from now. Our brains, evolved for an immediate return world, are poorly designed for this. So Clear suggests adding immediate satisfaction to good habits. The simplest form is a habit tracker, a calendar where you mark an X for each day you show up. The goal becomes, don't break the chain. The streak itself becomes its own reward. You're not just building a habit, you're watching yourself become the kind of person who doesn't miss. And when you do miss, because everyone does, the rule is never missed twice. One missed day is an accident. 2 is the beginning of a new habit. Get back on track immediately, even if you can only do a fraction of what you planned. The final section of the book ventures into territory that most habit guides skip entirely. What happens after you've built good habits? What happens when the system is working, and you still feel something is missing? Claire introduces the Goldilocks Rule. Human beings are most motivated when working on tasks that are right at the edge of their current abilities. Not too easy, that breeds boredom. Not too hard, that breeds anxiety. Right in the zone where you're slightly stretched but not overwhelmed. Athletes call this being in the zone. Psychologists call it a flow state. It's the sweet spot of engagement. As habits become automatic, they slip below that zone. What was once challenging becomes routine. And routine, without adjustment, can become stagnation. Claire's advice is to keep nudging the difficulty upward. Keep finding the next edge. That's not just good habit practice, it's how you go from being good at something to becoming truly excellent. He also makes a point about talent that's worth sitting with tonight. We tend to think success is about finding the right habits and grinding hard enough. But genes create real differences in what comes naturally, and fighting those differences is often the wrong battle. Claire doesn't use this as an excuse, he uses it as a design principle. The question isn't how do I get better at everything? It's which game am I best suited to play? The habits that feel like play to you but work to everyone else, those are the habits worth doubling down on. He also acknowledges something important, the downside of mastery. When a habit becomes so automatic that you stop thinking about it, you stop improving. The pianist who plays the same piece perfectly every night will never get better at sight reading. The writer who publishes on autopilot will plateau. Some level of conscious reflection, stepping back and asking, is this still working, is required to keep growing. Now let's look at how this book sits alongside others in the field. The closest predecessor is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, published in 2012. Duhigg introduced the habit loop, cue, routine, reward, and showed through case studies in neuroscience how it operates in individuals, organizations, and societies. Claire's framework is a direct evolution. He borrows the loop, refines it into 4 steps, and builds a practical system around it that Duhigg doesn't quite provide. Where Duhigg is more journalistic and explanatory, Claire is more prescriptive and operational. If you loved The Power of Habit and wanted a roadmap to actually implement the ideas, Atomic Habits is that book. B.J. Fogg's Tiny Habits, published in 2019, overlaps significantly with Claire, particularly on the ideas of starting small, anchoring habits to existing behaviors, and designing for motivation. Fogg's framework is gentler and more emotion-forward. He emphasizes celebration and self-compassion in a way Claire doesn't quite match. They complement each other beautifully, and readers who find Clear's system a bit too optimization focused often find Fogg's approach easier to sustain in practice. There's also meaningful overlap with Angela Duckworth's Grit, which explores the psychology of sustained effort and deliberate practice. Clear bridges those worlds, the mechanics of daily behavior on one hand, and the identity and meaning that keep you going on the other. What makes Atomic Habits the most widely read book in this space is partly timing, partly execution, and partly that Clear got the balance right. Enough science to feel credible. Enough story to feel human. Enough practicality to feel useful. And a prose style that flows unusually well for a self-help book. But no book earns only praise. Let's be honest about where this one has limits. The most significant critique is that the book presents a tidy, rational picture of human behavior, and real people are messier than that. The 4 laws assume a degree of self-awareness, time, and stability that not everyone has. Someone struggling with poverty, trauma, or chronic illness faces habit challenges that environment design and identity shifts can't easily address. The book is genuinely excellent for people who are fundamentally okay and want to be better. It's less useful for people whose lives are in genuine chaos. There's also the question of which habits. Clear gives you a powerful system for building habits, but offers little guidance on which habits to build. For a reader already clear on their values and direction, that's fine. For someone still figuring out what a meaningful life looks like, the system is a solution in search of a problem. A subtler concern, the identity framing can tip into pressure. When every action is a vote for who you are, when skipping a workout becomes a vote against your athletic identity, it can create a harsh internal narrative around imperfection. Clear addresses this with the never miss twice rule, which helps. But the overall tone can feel demanding, leaving little room for rest, for seasons of slowness, or for habits that exist simply because they bring joy. These aren't reasons to put the book down. They're reasons to read it with your own life as the filter, not as a prescription to follow exactly. So what do you carry into sleep tonight? Maybe it's the ice cube. That image of invisible work accumulating beneath the surface, and the patience required to trust it. You may be at 28 degrees right now. The ice hasn't melted yet. But the heat is real. The work is real. And the threshold is closer than it feels. Maybe it's the identity question. Not what do I want, but who am I becoming? Because when you answer the second question, the first one often answers itself. The runner runs. The reader reads. The person who takes care of their body finds the next step obvious. Or maybe it's something simpler, just one small change. One cue made more visible. One friction removed. One habit you've been meaning to start, shrunk down to its 2-minute version. Not because 2 minutes is the destination, but because starting is the whole battle. James Clear began with a baseball bat to the face and built his way back through tiny, repeated choices. Not because he was extraordinary, but because he trusted that small things, practiced consistently, become extraordinary over time. That's the promise of Atomic Habits. Not a dramatic transformation. A quiet, steady, compounding one. Sleep well. Let it settle in. And we'll see you at Whispering Pages for the next one.